Okay. So we're gathered here today to remember and to celebrate the life of Professor Hardy T. Frye. Hardy was my friend, colleague, and mentor. And we know that these are challenging times in a great number of respects. And therefore we appreciate that you've come here today to share these moments of remembrance for Hardy's life. First of all, on behalf of everyone present and on behalf of myself, let me express my sincere condolences to Hardy's widow, Rosette Costello, who is not yet here today. We're not sure if she's going to come. She's clearly, as you can imagine, emotionally affected by the passing of her husband. But I do want to express my condolences to her, to their daughters, Hallie Costello and Adama Frye, and to their granddaughter, Jasmine Frye. Okay. So today's event is sponsored by the Institute for the Study of Societal Issues. It's co-sponsored by the Department of Sociology at UC Santa Cruz, where Hardy Frye was a professor. It's co-sponsored by the University of California Office of the President, where Hardy worked for many years promoting equity system-wide activities. And it's co-sponsored by the Department of African American Studies, where Professor Frye returned to teach in that department, my department, in his post-retirement period. On behalf of all these units, I'm so appreciative that you've joined us today. I'd also like to thank Professor Laura Perez, who is the director of the Latinx Research Center, which is where we're housed today, and she's kindly provided us with these facilities and this building in order to hold this memorable event. Events like this require a great deal of attention to detail, and they require a great deal of sensitivity. So I'd particularly like to thank my colleagues at the Institute, Associate Director Deborah Lustig and Office Manager Cyronda Calhoun, for organizing this event. We're very grateful to both of them. Finally, my sincere thanks to all the people who have provided information, insights, and photographs about Hardy's life and contributions. The format for today's event is that we'll begin with a program of several speakers who were central to Hardy's life. And then we'll take a break for some food and some refreshments and drink, and a chance to mingle and share some memories. And then we'll return to an open microphone for anyone else who wants to say a few words. Now on the program, you'll see that we were scheduled to receive and present a short video by Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Unfortunately, Congresswoman Lee is in DC dealing with politics of great import. Okay. She's been unable to send us a video, but she did enter Professor Hardy Frye into the Congressional Record in June. And after these initial presentations, I'll read a short excerpt from that entry into the Congressional Record. Okay, thank you. Now I'm pleased to introduce my friend, colleague, mentor, Chancellor's Professor Emeritus at UC Berkeley, Professor Troy Duster, who is also Hardy's mentor and a colleague and friend. Welcome, Troy.
There is a cliche. It goes something like this. You've all heard most of the cliche. It goes like this. When the good Lord made Joe, he broke the mold, signifying that there was something unique, special about Joe. Well, it turns out, of course, that that's true for each and every one of us. We each have some unique configuration of features, experiences, birth order. We're all unique. Even twins who are from the same cell, monozygotic, have distinctiveness. So, that's true for all of us. But it was especially true for Hardy Frye. Hardy combined a unique package of attributes, experiences, style of presentation, unmistakably his own. He had a kind of course, Alabama, rural, down-home folksy political manner, but then he'd come up with some esoteric quotation from Gramsci or from Frantz Fanon. And this was often disquieting to his audience. How could he put together a package of rural Alabama and Gramsci? Well, he could. And he combined that to experience unique ways of trying to get people to vote during Freedom Summer in 1964. He went to the South, was in rural Mississippi, rural Alabama. Dangerous work. And indeed, Hardy was in jail for several days as a function of his activities with voter registration attempts in Mississippi and in Alabama. So you can imagine my surprise when his first job offer and his first job after getting his Ph.D. was at Yale University. Now, it surprised Yale. And I used to amuse Hardy by saying, there ought to be a movie, a Hollywood movie, Hardy Frye Goes to Yale. Well, turns out at Yale, he would meet and become close friends with John Brown Childs, who you'll hear from in a moment, and he became friends with Skip Gates, Henry Louis Gates Jr. Now, the issue of uniqueness and fit, of course, is what I began with, and there actually came a moment on the quadrant at Yale where one of the deans, they called them their masters at the college, stopped Hardy and wanted to have a conversation with him. And he said, Hardy, I'm not sure I know how to say this, but somehow you're not just a good fit for Yale. Well, that was part one. But then it got outrageous because one of his colleagues in his own department said to him one day, this is not the post office, you know. Yeah, so Hardy endured sometimes of insults of that kind from colleagues at Yale that sort of, in the context of his spending time in rural Mississippi, were also dangerous to the psyche and the ego. Well, Hardy got on the phone. He called me, he said, Dustin, you gotta get me out of here. You gotta get me out of here. Now the timing was perfect because I had just received a large research grant and also some funds from the university to hire postdoctoral fellows. And so it turned out that year I was able to bring together the first three postdocs. They were Tomas Almaguer, David Wellman, and Hardy Frye. Now, in due time, as you heard from Stephen, Hardy would go on with David Wellman to join the faculty at UC Santa Cruz, where Hardy would turn out to be a much better fit. But let me return to the theme of Hardy's uniqueness. He was comfortable on the streets of East Oakland or in a bar in East Oakland as he was in a seminar room at the university. That's an unusual combination. He was as comfortable talking to diplomats in Guyana, where he was director of the Peace Corps for a couple of years. He could talk in, therefore, to both sharecroppers and diplomats, to university presidents, to organizers, and he did so with great effect. You heard from Stephen that he returned to Berkeley after retirement to teach courses at the Department of African American Studies, and is very successful in connecting with the black students. So much so that you heard a remarkable tribute from Jaylen Brown, currently an NBA basketball player with the Boston Celtics. And Brown said that Hardy had been instrumental in turning him around and making him understand the importance of political analysis and political activism. Now, many of us in the academy have complex phrases and languages to get through what we're seeing today. So, speaking of a resurgence of the white right, the emergence of all of these developments around critical race theory and so on. Hardy didn't much talk about that in terms of the academic, but he did call me the night after Trump was elected. And he said in crisp Hardy Frye style, "Whitey's mad, Troy. Whitey's mad, somebody's gonna pay." Among all of us, therefore, there is, as I said, uniqueness. But Hardy was especially unique. His capacity to put together an unlikely package of political passion, activism, scholarship, deep and abiding friendships. These friendships lasted 40, 50, 60 years. An enduring concern for how to keep this connection with his fellow man. So among all of us, again, we're all unique. But the cliche has special meaning for me when I say the good Lord, after he made Hardy Frye, she broke the mold. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Troy. Before I introduce the next guest, Yvette Goulat, let me just say briefly, I'll tell you later, if I get a moment, the first time that I met Hardy Frye. But let me tell you about the second time, it will be brief. Hardy Frye said, "You have to understand, Steve Small, what I'm made of." I was discussing Foucault in the building formerly known as Barrows, and then I was chatting with Eldridge Cleaver in the Mediterranean. That's my knowledge base. Thanks. So our next guest is Yvette Goulat. She is Vice President for Graduate and Undergraduate Affairs, Vice Provost for Equity, Diversity and Inclusion, and Chief Diversity Officer at the University of California, and a former colleague of Hardy Frye. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's good to see everyone. I, on behalf of President Michael Drake and Provost and Executive Vice President Michael Brown, I bring condolences to the family on behalf of the University of California. I'm here to talk a little bit about Dr. Frye at the system. And I called him Dr. Frye, just to be really clear. I never felt adequate to call him Hardy, so I will refer to him as Dr. Frye. So I want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Frye at the system and his contributions to the University of California community, but also to local, state, and national communities. They were enormous. They were pervasive. They were energizing for our ongoing work toward more and better, greater diversity, equity, inclusion, both in education and writ large. The circumstances and choices that steered Dr. Frye to this work, at which he excelled, and the lessons he learned along the way, some of which have come up in Professor Duster's remarks, and I'm sure many more will come up throughout the afternoon. They tell quite a grand story. They tell a story anchored in pivotal places and moments in American history. So I'm going to share some of that impact on the university as a whole, beyond the campuses where he taught and where he conducted research. An impact that was grounded in collaboration and in compromise, but also no doubt deeply informed by his experiences growing up in the segregated South and in the Civil Rights Movement, the Congress for Racial Equality, or CORE, in Compton, and with friends of SNCC. There is also no doubt that these experiences shaped him over the decades into the renowned contributor and consultant in matters of equity policy, community development, and intersegmental collaboration and cooperation that we knew him to be. Dr. Frye's contributions to the University of California are still felt at every campus and across the system. So if you know anything about the Office of the President, you might think of it as a rather cold place, filled with policy wonks and operatives. Some of them are here today. Focused on operations that support teaching, research, and public service, but not necessarily of those things, if you know what I mean. But in my decades working there, I would say you would not be entirely wrong if you had that perception. It's because of the environments and the type of work that is primarily conducted there that I think Dr. Frye's contributions stand out. First of all, he was a big personality. He had an infectious laugh, he had a welcoming demeanor, and he was someone who brought you his vision and what he wanted to accomplish the very, very first time you met him. You knew exactly who Dr. Frye was about. And he served as a guiding light for so many of us as we've navigated the work of this really complex system. Most of the leaders at the Office of the President are focused on the university and its governance and its oversight. In contrast, Dr. Frye focused on the communities beyond the wall of the institution and how to bring those communities in and how to transform the institution so that it was deserving of those communities. For the system, he led the Urban School Community Collaborative, which forged robust partnerships between each of the campuses and their local communities to advance academic and social well-being for marginalized young people. These collaborations persist to this day. They're continuing to empower communities and youth throughout the state, and they're setting a standard for intersegmental cooperation that has served California well in its efforts toward equitable education for all of its students. So as a result of the work that Dr. Frye did, all UC campuses are home to P20 intersegmental regional partnerships, which are the evolution of his vision of UC in the community. And several of our campuses are home to K-12 schools that embrace the principles embodied in Dr. Frye's Urban Community School Collaborative. Dr. Frye's legacy of collaboration and of shared responsibility informs much of the work I and my colleagues pursue every day. And though it pains us to miss him, it is by participating in this ongoing work that aims to improve lives and strengthen all of our communities that we are able to tell his story over and over again. We will miss him. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yvette, for sharing with us some of the impacts that our friend and colleague Hardy Frye has had across the UC system and across the state. Our next speaker is Herman Gray. Herman Gray is Professor Emeritus of Sociology at UC Santa Cruz and a former colleague and close friend of Hardy's. Herman.
Good evening. Thank you, Stephen, and my deepest condolences to Rosette and to Halle and to Adama and the entire Frye family. My thanks also to Stephen and his colleagues for organizing this memorial and giving me the opportunity to comment basically on Hardy's Santa Cruz family. Hardy belonged to the department, was a member of the Department of Sociology, and many of his UCSC colleagues are here with us today. I see Julia and in the back row with Craig Reineman and David Wellman and Deborah Wu. And Rosalinda was also a colleague of his. Others like Bill Domhoff, Pam Roby, and John Brown-Charles could not be here today. And so in John's absence, he asked me to share this with you today, and I'm going to read directly from what he sent. Hardy Frye and I first crossed paths briefly in 1965 in Alabama when he was the field secretary in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And I was in the support group, Friends of SNCC. But our sustained friendship began in 1975 at Yale, where he and I were just hired assistant professors in the new African American Studies program with joint appointments in anthropology and sociology. Although Hardy chose to return to California after his first academic year at Yale, he enhanced the development of that innovative program with his always tenacious pro-democracy activism, as well as his impressive classical sociological acuity of deep observational and analytic insights about the world. Typical of Hardy's generosity of spirit, he quickly became a beloved mentor at Yale for a group of first college generation Puerto Rican students from the Bronx. At UC Santa Cruz in the late 80s and into the 90s, Hardy was a pivotal member of the Third World Faculty Forum, which crossed race and ethnic lines to push for equity and diversity among faculty and students. His work as Associate Dean of the Social Sciences positioned him to help us move toward achievement of these goals. Hardy's 1980 book, Black Parties, Political Power, in the Yale African American Studies series, Perspectives on the Black World, was praised in the foreword by Berkeley Professor William Kornhauser as, quote, a significant contribution to political sociology as well as Black struggle. Hardy says in the book's dedication to his parents, Lily and Andrew Frye, that they raised me with confidence that any goal I choose is possible, providing I struggle. He achieved much through that struggle. He was a stalwart friend for me and a staunch comrade in the battle for democracy. Long may his spirit live as we continue our arduous climb toward liberty and justice for all. John Brown Childs. Now, as for me, I arrived as a sociology graduate student at UC Santa Cruz in 1978, and Hardy was one of the first faculty members that I met. Hardy chaired my dissertation committee. I served as his teaching assistant. I gave guest lectures in his courses, and once he returned to UC Berkeley, I occasionally advised his students who were interested in studying media and culture. When I was completing my studies at UC Santa Cruz as a graduate student, I attended the American Sociological Association meetings and the the ABS meetings, the Association of Black Sociologists, and I went along with Hardy. He seemed to know everybody. He introduced me to his national network of colleagues and friends. He was instrumental in my return to UC Santa Cruz in 1991, where for a brief, glorious period, John, Hardy, and I were colleagues. Hardy had a larger-than-life personality, gregarious spirit, and a steady moral, ethical compass. Hardy was above all a keen political observer, passionate defender of social, economic, and racial justice, and he brought these attributes to his classroom, to the faculty meetings, administrative responsibilities, and leadership in the university. He relished the give and take of exchange and mutual discovery with his students, his colleagues, and his friends. He touched many students at UCSC, and I know that he was extremely proud of his graduate students with whom he worked, including Gary Rollison and Stan Oden, who is here today. Hardy steadfastly believed in the power of critical analysis to diagnose complex problems like racism, social inequality, and sexism wherever they operated, including college campuses, academic departments, the field of sociology, and local city government. Moreover, he believed deeply in racial justice, and through his life and work as a scholar, activist, teacher, and colleague, Hardy valued social relationships, and he knew from firsthand experiences in the movement, here at the Institute, and in the classroom, the power of collective action to change the world. This fierce commitment to social justice, fairness, and critical intellectual engagement shaped Hardy's relationship with his colleagues, his students, and his communities, and helped move UC Santa Cruz towards a more egalitarian, welcoming place for so many faculty, students, and staff, including me. I am forever grateful for the generosity and compassion Hardy extended to Rosalinda and I. He not only introduced me to his vast network of friends, colleagues, and neighbors at UC Berkeley, but he arranged with Troy and Janice for me to take my oral exams at the Institute. When I was revising my dissertation for publication, he arranged for me to have an office at the Institute where I met many people in this room, including my friend Steve. And on a more personal level, when our son, Sergio, left home and was living on the streets of Berkeley, Hardy was a reassuring presence and source of support for us. He let us know when he'd seen Sergio hanging out on Telegraph or on Shattuck and that he was okay. When Sergio grew up and started his own family and opened a restaurant in Berkeley, Hardy was so proud of him. He would often say to me, "Tell Sergio I passed his spot and there was a lion outside trying to get him." For his colleagues, friends, and students, Hardy's kindness was wide, his generosity deep, and his example lasting. Hardy, John, and I spent some memorable times together. One of the last times was when the three of us had lunch together at Hardy's favorite spot on San Pablo in Berkeley. Ever the organizer and teacher, Hardy reflected on how proud and impressed he was with the current generation of Black scholars, media commentators, and political spokespeople that he heard and saw. As well he should have, he felt a special connection, perhaps even fulfilled, that he and his generation of teachers, organizers, and scholars, through their sacrifice, vision, fight, and courage, had something to do with the formation of this generation. They did. Well done, Frye. Well done.
Thank you very much, Herman. Before I introduce the next speaker, my department colleague and chair of the Departments of African American and African Diaspora Studies, let me just say something quickly. Now, I don't know if Hardy Frye read Mao Zedong, but he probably did. He was proud of the fact that he'd been in Africa, and he asked me to bring him to Brazil. But before I took him to Brazil, I got my first job as an assistant professor, and I said to Hardy Frye, I'm an immigrant in your country. I need you to advise me how to succeed here. He said, Steve, it's no problem. Come to my house Saturday morning, and I'll tell you everything. I got there Saturday morning. He threw to me an overall and a spade. He said, we're going to dig my backyard while we talk. And I'll tell you everything I know. And he did, and I'm here today. And I'm grateful for it. Thank you. As I've gotten older, I've found the need to wear glasses, fortunately. Our next speaker is my department colleague, Nikki Jones, Professor of African American Studies and African Diaspora Studies, and Chair of the Department of African American Studies here at UC Berkeley. Welcome, Nikki.
Good evening, everyone. So thank you, Stephen. As Professor Small said, I am the current chair of the Department of African American Studies here at UC Berkeley, just a couple months in, and I want to thank you, Professor Small, and the staff of ISSI for organizing this memorial. It's been a hard time for all of us, and to be in company and in community and honoring the life and legacy of Professor Frye is very meaningful to me, and I know to so many. I also appreciate the opportunity to share our condolences on behalf of the department with Professor Frye's family, and also our gratitude for sharing him with us during his retirement. I did not have a chance to know Professor Frye for very long. I joined the department in January 2014, but after listening to the words of those who have spoken before me, I feel that I did have a chance to get to know the parts of him that are fundamental to who he was as a person and a scholar. He was a generous spirit. He was a compassionate person. He was a brilliant scholar. He was a mentor. So many things that I saw in the short time that I knew him. And so what I'll do today is just speak just very briefly to who he was on the floor, on the sixth floor as we call it. And by the time I got to the sixth floor, he was certainly our elder in residence. And we have a program now where we have an elder in residence, it's Daphne Muse, but he was our elder in residence before we had our elder in residence. He was certainly wise in that way. But what I'll remember is that grin and that laugh that folks have mentioned already, and that irreverence at times when he was saying something he knew he probably shouldn't say, but was going to say it anyway. And kind of bringing you in on the joke, and really his warmth, and the warmth with which he welcomed me and a student that I brought along with me from UC Santa Barbara when I joined the department into the community of the sixth floor. There was one afternoon when I was working in my office and I was kind of typing away, and Professor Frye walked by, my door was open, and he stopped in and he said, I just want to say thank you. And I was like, I was sure I didn't do anything that was deserving of thanks in that moment. And so I said, thank you for what? And he said, thank you for bringing Kenley, who's my student. She's going places. And Kenley had taken an independent study with him. And what I appreciated that as a new person as a new person in the department, and for my student who I knew felt some anxiety about being new, was the validation, the welcoming, that generosity of spirit, and that support and love of Black students that we heard about earlier. I also remember his counsel in the wake of the election of Donald Trump. That was a dark time on the floor. It was a hard time for many students here on campus. And I'm not sure what brought us together in the conference room on the sixth floor, but we were side by side and sitting side by side, and he was telling me a bit about his experience growing up in the South, in Tuskegee. And he turned to me and he said something I don't remember it exactly. It wasn't "Whitey is mad," but it was close. But what I took away from it, and looking into his eyes and listening to what he was saying, was the lesson that he had faced the evils of white supremacy head on before, and that we could do it too. As a generation, we could do it again, and that he was with us. And it was a brief moment, but it's something in the years since that I've held on to. And it's something it's a memory that I come back to, and I'm grateful for having it. And although he is no longer on the floor, it is without a doubt that his spirit lives on in the many lives he's touched and in the many roles he's played. I think some of us got an opportunity to look at the photos that we're moving through, and for me that window into who he was off the floor says so much about his life and his legacy. And so he certainly lives on in the memories of myself and my colleagues, the faculty, staff, and students in our department, and for that we are grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikki. I'd like to ask you to join me in welcoming Hallie Costello. Hardy was the proud father. Hardy and Rosette were the proud parents of 2 daughters, and his daughter, Hallie Costello, is here today. She's brought Hardy. And Hardy wanted to be here. He said he doesn't want any tears. He wants you to be here, be happy, be fed, drink, and celebrate. So thank you, Hallie.
Hello. This will be short and sweet, but thank everyone for coming out tonight. It is difficult at best to stand before you and attempt to honor my father in words. It is never easy to capture someone in a speech. Words frequently fall short of capturing someone's true essence. So instead of making an attempt, I'm going to just ask each of us gathered here to sit in silence for a moment to remember something about this man, my father, who touched each of our lives in many ways. Okay. I feel so grateful to have had as much time with my father as I did. I cherish the many memories I have with my father. I had with my father, and know he is smiling down on all of us and already probably talking shit about the Raiders and the 49ers. And I'm also humbled by my mom's strength. And just her ability to not fall apart all the way. I love you, Mom. Thank you. You've been a wonderful mother.
No, not all that.
Well, I don't know what else to say. There's so much to say. So thank you guys again for coming out today to celebrate the memory of my amazing pop.
Hallie, we appreciate that you've been able to stand up and share these insights with us. We're doing okay for time, so I'm going to take a moment and read the message from Barbara Lee. Congresswoman. But before I do that, let me mention that, as I said, Hardy came to Brazil with me. He also came to the Netherlands. He said, "You're the diaspora guy. I want to see the diaspora. Bring me and show me some black people, and I can educate them." And I said, "I'll bring you." In Brazil, they knew he had a personality. They kept asking me in Portuguese, "Who is this guy? Who is this guy?" And I suddenly said, "It's the grande professor, the big professor." So he said, "They keep calling me grande professor." I said, "Yeah, they know who you are." In Amsterdam, he came to speak at the Black Europe Summer School, which is a program that's been going there for 15 years. And he prepared a lecture, and he started to speak, and the people stood up and they said, "We don't want this. We want to know about you growing up in Alabama. We want to know about your experiences with white people and white supremacy." Hardy said, "I'll do it. It won't be easy, and it won't make you happy," but he did it. And he spoke from the heart. He told them about his experiences. He told them about his struggles. He told them that Jim Crow was immediate, fist in our face. But it didn't mean that we cried every day. We also laughed, we smiled, we worked together. And that's why I'm here today, he said. Okay. So that's the story I wanted to share with you. As I mentioned, Congresswoman Barbara Lee sends her condolences to the family, and she had wished to share with us a short video message today. But due to pressing issues in DC, she's unable to provide us with that message. However, I wish to share with you a brief excerpt from the Congressional Record. The Honorable Barbara Lee of California, speaking in the House of Representatives, entered Professor Hardy T. Frye into the Congressional Record on June 24, 2021. Congresswoman Lee rose to honor Professor Hardy Thomas Frye, who had recently passed away after a lifetime of service. Congresswoman mentioned that Mr. Frye elected to join the Army at the young age of 17. While serving, he kept a close eye on developments in the civil rights movement by reading black magazines and newspapers. Following his discharge from the Army in Texas in 1959, Hardy Frye moved to Compton, California. Then, said Congresswoman Lee, in 1964, Mr. Frye joined the Friends of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, to get involved in the Mississippi Freedom Summer and related activities. Mr. Frye was an active participant in the free speech movement at Berkeley and became a pivotal member in the progressive Berkeley Citizens Action. Through his work with the Berkeley Citizens Action, Mr. Frye was able to spearhead the passage of progressive policies at the local level. Congresswoman continues in the honorable mention, that Mr. Frye was not only motivated by local issues, but he was also committed to making the world a better place. To that end, Mr. Frye served as the director of the U.S. Peace Corps in Guyana and focused on promoting community collaborations. Therefore, Congresswoman Lee finishes, "Today, on behalf of California's 13th District, I commend Hardy Thomas Frye for his service to the Bay Area community and to this country as a professor, an activist, and a veteran." You can get a copy of that entry into the Congressional Record. This brings us to the end of this first session.
I'm glad you're here. Hardy was a very special and important person, and I'm glad he's being remembered because so many people that have made great contributions to us.
Nancy?
Yes?
It's okay to take.
Oh, take the mask off, yes. Anyway, I was a student at Cal when I met Hardy. I was involved with BCA, and I was working on Gus Newport's campaign. I probably met him before Gus's campaign, but we were very involved in getting Gus elected. And after Gus got elected, Hardy took a sabbatical from UC Santa Cruz and went to work for Mayor Newport. And I wasn't here at the beginning of the conversation, so I don't know if anyone referenced that. But I would love to hear Hardy describe his experience that year, because I don't think he really enjoyed city government very much. I think he very much liked, he supported Gus anywhere, but I don't think he really, hey, bureaucracies are bureaucracies, right? And of course, a mayor, it's not a strong mayor form of government, so you only have so much influence or power, and I think probably we thought we would have a lot more, and that may have frustrated him. But one of them, I have many, many memories of Hardy, but I'm a native Californian, and I didn't know that many people from the South. And one time I don't remember where we were, but somebody saw that this like 5-a-dime store had strawberry soda. And I had never tasted strawberry soda. And so they bought strawberry sodas, but they bought them specifically for Hardy. And they bought peanuts. And so I watched Hardy pour the peanuts into the strawberry soda, which was a very common thing that you did in Mississippi, which I had no idea. And I'm looking at this like, peanuts and strawberry soda. But the person who bought them, which I think was Mark Allen, he then proceeded to do it also, and they had a great time drinking strawberry soda and eating peanuts. But I really do wish that I could hear Hardy's version of his experience in city government, because he obviously, did many, many things in his life, and in academia, with the Peace Corps and with all. But I think, who knows, whether he thought that was the most frustrating or whether he thought it was great. I would love to hear it. And again, I'm so glad you are all here and honoring him, and that's what I have to share.
Thank you very much, Senator Skinner.
Hello, everybody. My name is Amir. Well, Dr. Amir Hassan Loggins, because if it weren't for Professor Frye, I wouldn't have that title. So when I came to UC Berkeley, I transferred. I'm from Richmond, California, and I came into his class. And one of the lectures, it was one of my first quarter, no semester. I'm at Stanford, so I'm thinking quarter. But it was my first semester there, and I went in on somebody that said something real out of pocket in class. And he was like, man, you got a good analysis, but you cuss too goddamn. Now he's cussing, as he's telling me I cuss too goddamn much. He's cussing me out, right? So he was like, but I like the way you think. Come up to my office. And I spent so many hours in his office, stealing his books, stealing his knowledge, him asking for the books back, me never returning them. But for me, on the 6th floor, which is a very special place for me, because I did my BA, MA, and Ph.D. on the 6th floor. And Professor Frye and Professor Allen were like my grandfathers up there. And the role that they took, the way they mentored me as a black man on that campus, on that 6th floor, and stayed in my life post me being an academic, and we didn't even really talk about academics too much. Most of my conversation with Professor Frye was about basketball, football, what the hell is going on in the streets, what is these motherfuckers doing? It was all of that, but what it did was it allowed me to realize that while I'm in the academy, I can be myself. And he always told me to stay myself, and he told me that I hadn't heard the term really. I hadn't heard of Gramsci, but he said, you're an organic intellectual. You know what that is? And I was like, nah, not really. He's like, well, you motherfucker, you one of them. And I held on to that, and I studied that. And I started to look at myself more as an intellectual, not an academic. And I started to incorporate all the work that I do in the community into my work, and to know that there was a way for me to be my authentic self and to hold on to my elders. Like when I was saying that to you, I mean that, because if it wasn't for the elders, I wouldn't be here. And Professor Frye was one of my elders. Professor Frye, he meant a lot to me. And I'm not looking at you on purpose, because I know how much he meant to you. I mean, I remember talking to you that day, and I do want you to know how much he meant to people. And I'm not talking about on some academic shit. I'm talking about like as Professor Frye meant. When I introduced him to my kids, it was because of who he was, not because of him having a doctorate or being in SNCC. None of those things mattered. They mattered, but they didn't matter. That wasn't why I introduced my children to him. I needed them to know who that man was that impacted my life and why I'm the person that I am today. So I really honor Professor Frye. And I thank you all for letting me have some time up here.
Good afternoon, evening. My name is Ben Tucker, and I was a colleague of Hardy's at the Office of the President, but more important, I was a neighbor. We lived a few blocks apart, and I became a fast friend of Hardy Frye's. And one of our activities was weekly lunches or happy hours in some of our favorite watering holes. Hardy loved to go to Arts Craft Shack or the 44 Sports Club or Skates on the Bay, and we would sit, and every time, I mean each and every time that we would sit there, someone would come by. Professor Frye! Dr. Frye! Comrade Frye! I said, each occasion, who are these people? Oh, I was at Yale with him in graduate school. Who is that person? Oh, I was in jail with him in Mississippi. And they would oftentimes pick up the tab. And with each of these people that came by and recognized him, that would be a lecture. And so I learned so much sitting down there with Hardy and him telling me about all of the people that came to pay homage to him. And these happy hours and these lunches, they were like the public square to Hardy. And when Hardy's health started to fail, and he could no longer drive and to get out to the places that we used to frequent, he never lost the appetite. Hey, Ben, let's go get a beer. Hey, Ben, let's go to lunch. And I remember the last day I visited Hardy. We sat down in front of his TV. We watched a little breaking news on CNN, and then we'd both go into our nod, and we'd sleep, and I'd wake up, and I'd say, okay, Hardy, I'm out of here. You going, man? I said, yep. And his wife, Rosette, always kept cases of water by the front door. And he would say, hey man, you've been drinking. Take some water with you. And I'd say, okay, Hardy. He said, in fact, take 2. And as I was leaving, he said, hey Ben. I said, what? He said, thanks, man. And that shook me. I said, okay, okay. And I left, and those were the last words he spoke to me. And so, to Hardy Frye, I want to say, thanks, man. Yeah. Thanks for the memories. Thanks for the academic work that you did. Thanks for the community work. And thanks for the water. Because I will be drinking from your well for a long time to come. Thank you, Dr. Frye.
I met Hardy Frye in the spring of 1965 at Sacramento State College. So I'm here to say before Berkeley and even before Davis, here was my sister namesake Marsh, there was Sac State. He was on a return trip from Mississippi, and he would always come back and report to the locals what was going on. I was a freshman and was walking past the cafeteria, and I heard this ruckus going on behind some bushes. And it was kind of loud, so I thought, what in the world? So I walked around there, and there was Frye, at the top of his voice, teaching people about things. He loved to hear me say, and he always told me to tell his friends, that I was on the way to my social problems class, and I met one. Hardy arrived in Sacramento in 1963 to attend Sacramento City College, and he left in October '68 to go to Berkeley. During those 5 years, Hardy trained political organizers on how to I'm legally blind, confrontations, how to organize political confrontations and how to agitate, how to make change, and he led hundreds and hundreds in political protests. Hardy organized us for the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, against police violence, farm workers movement, and black college admissions. On campus, Hart created the Educational Opportunity Program that was his signature program. There's so much that Hardy did that I could say, but I was told 2 minutes by my brother Small here. With Dean of Students Peg McComb to bring black, brown, and poor white students to campus with stipends. And I want to underscore that the first special education program that Hardy created for students to come to campus were for black, brown, and white students with stipends. But out of this influx of black and brown students grew the Black Student Union and the Chicano Student Union. But Dick Reynolds and I are debating whether it was La Raza or the Chicano Student Unions. But anyway, when Hardy left Sacramento, he left behind a powerful cadre of protégés who carried on the work after him. And we have, I'm just going to say their names here from that Sac State contingent. There's me, who's now Dr. Pearl Alice Marsh, even though I don't look it. And these are all my buttons from the 60s up there in Sacramento. And my favorite one is for my friend Ken Dursa here, who worked SDS with Hardy. It's SDS Black Panther demonstration in Oakland. So we had Ken Dursa, who's still a labor organizer. We had Dick Reynolds, who picked up the torch and ran the Black Student Union after Hardy left. There's Jeanette Vidal, who was you were SDS, weren't you? Yeah, who was SDS. Marion Hall, who was SDS over there. Who did I leave out? Nobody. I think that's it. And point of personal privilege, because I think I stuck kind of to my 2 minutes, the person who was his co-chair of the Friends of SNCC in Sacramento, Maggie Washington, who's professor at Cornell, last night, she was scheduled to come out here, and the last night or the day before, she had a little health incident and couldn't make it. So she called me and dictated a 2-minute, because we've been riding them hard.
That's beautiful, that's beautiful. We've got some people standing waiting. I wonder if we could come back to that at the end. Just play it. The people of Berkeley have spoken.
My friendship with Hardy Frye began in summer 1966. He had just returned from the South and was reporting to Sacramento Friends of SNCC on his activities. I was a student at Sac State and excited about the new Black Power ideology espoused by the new SNCC president, Stokely Carmichael. I was even more excited after listening to Hardy and hearing him say he no longer was a pacifist. He told us we had a role to play in mass protest. He said when he was in he said we had a mass protest at the courthouse in West Tennessee. We all knelt in front of the door, and I led them in the Lord's Prayer. Can you believe Hardy leading somebody in the Lord's Prayer? A deputy sheriff came up and put a gun to my head, and I prayed. He pulled me up, and they took us all to jail. When I got out, I told everybody I got a new prayer now, and it's got 6 shots. So I won't read the rest of Maggie's. It's a beautiful statement because they really did we were SDS, we were anti-war movement, we were Black Student Union. Oh, I know, I wanted to say one line that I had that I passed over. That Hardy, he taught us to be really militant, and we took it to heart. I'm telling you, we would roll up into those classrooms and shut them down in a heartbeat. We would go up into the president's office and stop business because we were there to protest what was going on at Sacramento State College. They were allowing war recruiters to come to campus, and we weren't going to have it. So Hardy Frye just had a powerful impact on Sacramento. And those 5 years that he was there, I'm telling you, he was a mover and shaker among all of us. And for that, we are grateful.
It's really nice to be in community demonstrating respect for the life of a person who obviously impacted everyone here and also impacted people who can't be here but had a desire to be here. So I think we need to acknowledge that as well. I think there's 3 operative messages I want to leave with you. I'm Russell Williams, and I'm connected as a friend to Hardy and his family through Third World. And Third World is Janice Tanigawa. And that was Hardy's way of demonstrating respect. And that was also Janice's way of demonstrating her respect and friendship for Hardy. And I connected with Hardy and his family through her in the 80s. And so the first time I met Hardy, it was, "Hey, Third World, what's happening? What's going on?" And she would say, "Nothing, Frye. Tell me what's going on." And so immediately there was this intimate, personal connection of friendship and warmth. And over the years, I just sort of melded into that. And we became friends. We socialized together. We talked about life in general and offered each other advice and didn't take it and said, "That's fine, I'll deal with it later." So the other word other than respect is a song written by Bill Withers, and it's "Friend of Mine." And it's just a beautiful song about relationship and the meaning of life and how you should sort of go forward with your passion. And the final word, I guess, is about standing in your own truth and taking on the journey that you intend to invest over the course of your life. And I think that's best illustrated by Sly and his Family Stone. And the song is "Everyday People." So with that, I will say to Rosette and to Adama and to Holly and to Jasmine, remember everything. Remember the good, the bad, the indifference, and all the ugly, because that's what you want to remember, because that's the energy that's going to take you forward. So take care.
My name is David Wellman, and I go way back with Frye. I met him at the Friends of SNCC in San Francisco, and there's a couple friends of SNCC in this room. I want to welcome you. I'm glad you're here. I wanted to talk about Frye, but listening to people this afternoon has moved me to do something that I think Hardy would have done. This has been a wonderful event. The passion, the talk, the poetry that people are expressing in relationship to Hardy is marvelous. It's moving. And it's not reproducible. But we can do some of the things that Frye was pushing for. And one of the things that Frye and I would talk a lot about would be being shit disturbers and doing things that were the right things to do, even if they weren't planned and supposed to be. And that's what I want to do right now. I taught at the UC Santa Cruz for a number of years. So I'm familiar with the campus. I'm familiar with the campus administration. And I'm here today, and I'm listening to people reflecting on my brother, Hardy Frye. And I'm thinking what an incredible person he was, and how we didn't always appreciate that which was appreciable. And one of the things I've always appreciated about Hardy is that when he saw some shit, he called it by its name. Well, there's some shit in this game, and I'm going to call it by its name. There is a relatively new chancellor at the Santa Cruz campus. I can't even remember the woman's name. But she's on a tear. She wants Santa Cruz to become the campus of social change. And she thinks she invented social change. And she has completely ignored the history of social change on that campus and that campus's view of itself, to be much more specific. The campus at Santa Cruz is built into colleges. One of the colleges has the wonderful name of College 10, and they want to find a name for it. So who are they going to name now that they've got this new identity? They are the campus of social change. Well, they're going to call it John Lewis. John Lewis College. Can you dig it?
Yeah.
And I'm not opposed to that. I mean, John was a wonderful guy. Is a wonderful guy. And I'm saying to myself, as I'm listening today to people talking about my brother, Hardy Frye, and I'm saying, now why the hell is Santa Cruz, the University of California at Santa Cruz, naming a college after a SNCC leader, John Lewis, and not even mentioning the fact that one of Santa Cruz's very few black faculty was a SNCC organizer for 2 or 3 years. Don't even mention his name. And so I'm here to shit disturb. I want some of the people in here who still have relationships with UC Santa Cruz to organize that the next college, which is named at UC Santa Cruz, be called Hardy Frye College. Because everything we've been talking about is represented by Hardy. And Hardy was and is a major important figure in this kind of thinking. And he's being ignored by the very college that he was organizing at. And this goddamn chancellor's got the nerve to talk about putting the campus on the track to be a campus of social change. So I want to leave you all with those of you who still have a relationship with Santa Cruz to organize, to get together and make it a project for yourselves to be sure that the next college, which is named at UC Santa Cruz, is the Hardy Frye School. I could tell you lots of Hardy Frye stories, but the story I want you to leave here with from me is the story of somebody who got up and said what he thought needed to happen. And I hope people will talk with each other and do something about this. I'm willing to work with you, but I don't live in Santa Cruz anymore. And I don't have any relationship with Santa Cruz anymore. At least not any relationship that I'm willing to admit to.
Okay. Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to try and be as brief as I possibly can. So I'm just going to talk about Hardy Party Frye. That's how I knew him. That's how I was introduced. And he nicknamed me the Lover. He and his wife enjoyed their time at my parents' house back when black folks didn't live in Saratoga, California. Back in 1978, he would come down and we would have a party. And Hardy would say, "Hey, Lover, did you get the margarita mix? Hey, Lover, did you bring the beer? Hey, Lover, I heard you're into wine. You tried to graduate from college drinking wine? How'd you do that?" And I never forgot the conversations that they would have around the pool, which was, who's got the mix? Where's the tequila? And throw Rosette into the pool. David did it. Hardy would laugh. Joe Blum would say, "What you guys do down there?" And we all just sat around and had a wonderful time in the sun. And we didn't talk politics per se. We didn't talk about, well, I don't think this administration would do this, and I don't think SNCC would do that. We didn't do that. We just sat down, drank beer, tequila, and gave each other nicknames. And that was Hardy Frye. I didn't call him Dr. Frye. I let that happen from my mom and dad. He just called me the Lover. So thank you folks for all showing up here today. This is wonderful. And I wish my parents were alive so that they could see this. But hey, things move on. And believe it or not, I am a senior citizen now. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mark Toney. I'm an organizer by trade, a sociologist by discipline, and a troublemaker at heart. And I'm so influenced by Hardy Frye, who was all those things. And one of the statements that he and Gary Delgado, my mentor, Hardy was very involved in the Center for Third World Organizing, which trained me to be an organizer. One of their favorite sayings was, "If you don't start no shit, there may not be none." If you don't start no shit, there may not be none. And that's a motto that I have lived by. The only other thing I want to say about Hardy is that he loved, somebody mentioned this, he loved himself some poker. And when Gary Delgado would have poker night, oh yes, Hardy would come and have a good time. And Hardy did not like these games that had wild cards. He was like, that ain't no poker. Poker is like, you know, and anytime somebody would call a game that didn't have no wild cards, he'd say, okay, now that's a man's game. And, you know, and the thing about Hardy, fearless in playing poker. And I would dare say that the gentleman who mentioned of him taking the money at the poker game he was at, Hardy did give it back at some of the poker games we were at. Thank you.
I'm going to try and keep to your...
Sure, Joe, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Joe Blum. Joe Blum. In the picture, the two hands together, black and white, is Hardy and Frank Cichorka, who I'll mention in this thing. Hardy and I were close friends and comrades for 55 years. He was someone I could always count on to be there for me, and I hope and believe he felt the same way towards me. During the 60s, we fought together in the streets of Berkeley and Oakland on many occasions, and sometimes after those activities, on a Friday night, we would retreat to a poker game that I believe some of you present today also attended. But what I want to talk about is Hardy's political judgment and courage to speak his truth about movement matters, even when that was not a popular thing to do. His objective was always to encourage the movement, to unite the black community in their struggle for liberation, and to concentrate on that task above all others. In 1966, Hardy and I joined the editorial board of the movement newspaper, which was published by the staff of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee of California. Hardy was a SNCC veteran who worked in Holly Springs, Mississippi with his close friend, close comrade, and fabulous artist, Frank Cichorka, who gave us the iconic fist and the first drawing of a Black Panther for the Lowndes County, Alabama Freedom Movement, where Stokely was a key organizer. SNCC Chairman Stokely Carmichael had just popularized the concept of Black Power and was visiting the Bay Area for a number of events, the most prominent a speech at the Greek Theater at UC Berkeley, part of a day-long Black Power Day conference. I was an organizer of that conference. Hardy was critical of Stokely's schedule in the Bay Area, which he felt did not pay enough attention to the larger black community. He raised his concerns in an editorial board meeting of the paper. The result was an editorial in the movement signed by Hardy. In it, he raised questions and criticisms from many involved in the movement which needed to be addressed. Let me quote Brother Hardy. Now, the question I'm asking here is, when does Stokely Carmichael really speak to the masses of black people in Hunters Point, East 14th Street in Oakland, East Palo Alto, and other ghettos around the Bay Area? He was also critical of some of the black nationalist groups and some black intellectuals. Why aren't these black groups organizing to bring Stokely Carmichael to speak to the black community, instead of now criticizing whites who are trying to raise the issue of black power in their community? He was also critical of white SDS radicals like myself who failed to pay proper attention to the needs of the black community. It should have been remembered by the Students for a Democratic Society that when the Vietnam Day Committee held their rally, it was in West Oakland, right in the middle of the black ghetto, but yet when they hold a Black Power rally, it is held far away from the people concerned. Sorry about the reading, the print on this one is so small I can hardly read it. And finally he concluded, I feel that it is time to start explaining black power to the masses of people whose lives are most affected by the Black Power movement, first, and to all intellectual groups, black and white, second. And that the intellectuals and that the Black Power advocates and black intellectuals should spend more of their time in the poor communities trying to show poor people how to organize politically and economically so that they might get the man off their necks. We don't feel that the originators of Black Power should ask the Negro community around the Bay Area to send to their programs, and then when they come, not speak, address themselves primarily to the white radicals and black intellectuals. It is felt by this editorial staff that Mr. Carmichael had the responsibility to review his schedule in California before he came out and to make sure that he was speaking to the masses of black people as well as to whites while on this trip to Northern California. Since we were mostly a white group that were putting out the paper, we were sort of chicken shit and had Hardy sign the editorial, although he does say in that last part that that's how we felt. The conclusion was that when Stokely visited and met with the editorial board of the movement newspaper,
He came in demanding to know why he was criticized in his newspaper. We all replied that we were firm supporters of Black Power, but that the movement newspaper had an independent voice. With Hardy's help, we all advanced our political education. I dearly miss Dr. Frye. Thank you.
I know it's supposed to be over with. I spent my last days with Dr. Frye. I worked for his wife, Miss Costello, right here, Rosette, at Oakland Public Schools. But Dr. Frye was a mentor to me. He was like a father figure. And I really enjoyed him I'm missing him too. But Dr. Frye was a man of honor and integrity. When my son was murdered in Oakland in 2011, I'm sorry, Dr. Frye came to court, and Rosette also came to Oakland Public, to the courthouse every day for justice. My wife and I, we both got justice, but I spent the last day with Dr. Frye. All his friends had passed away, and they're 81 years old. He was the last one surviving sibling. But I want to play a song, if it's all right for you guys, before we leave tonight. And I know we're over time. And I thank you for allowing me to speak. Just keep smiling. Keep the faith. Thank you guys very much. I love you.
In many respects, Hardy Frye and I were very unusual friends. The first time I met Hardy Frye was actually in 1984. That's 37 years ago. And I just arrived as a student here. And Hardy was speaking at the Martin Luther King Student Union building. And I went to see him speak. And for the life of me, I couldn't believe he was a professor. He was direct. He was blunt. And as a foreigner in this country myself, I had some difficulty understanding him. However, it became clear to me over the years that despite the apparent differences, because of the African diaspora, we were kindred souls. For many, many years, Hardy would come to the house of David Minkus, and I would open the door for him, bring him up the stairs, pour him a drink, and we would sit and talk. Or rather, I would listen to them talking. And a couple of times I tried to interfere, and he used the MF word and said, listen, we were friends before you were born, so don't try to make any noise. Okay. And as things unfolded, I realized, I come from Liverpool, England, which was the slaving capital of the world, and I'm the first black person in the community to get a bachelor's degree. Never anymore. And it became clear to me, despite all the differences, Hardy Frye and I were the same. We were never meant to succeed. We were determined to succeed with the support of our families. And over the years, that's why we became close friends. He was always my mentor. He was always my advisor. And I was always willing to serve him with respect, and he treated me with respect. On behalf of the family, Rosette and Hallie, I'd like to thank you all for coming here today, for sharing your stories, for generating memories, for making us smile, and to remind us that it's not really an event until somebody black sings. Yeah, it's not really over until somebody black sings.